This episode of No Meat Athlete Radio is brought to you by our very own Complement Plus, the perfect complement to a plant-based diet, with just the hard-to-get nutrients and nothing else. Learn more at lovecomplement.com and use code NOMEAT at checkout to save $10 off your first order.
Hi, this is Hope.
This is Kareem.
Hi, this is Katie from Washington, D.C., and you're listening to No Meat
Athlete
Radio.
Matt, I've got some exciting news to share.
Okay, good. About social media?
Not about social media this time, nope.
Okay.
I have officially registered for my first race since February of 2019? 2020. 2019?
Wow. Okay. I think I know what race it is.
2020. Okay, all right. I already have lied to you. I guess I signed up for the Spartan race too, but this one comes before that, so it would be the first one that I would actually run.
Okay. All right. So Spartan, you're going to do the half marathon, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Logistical, easy reasons. Okay. So this one then is going to be longer.
It is. I'm going to do a 50K and a Font de Flora 50K around Lake James in North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And I'm really excited to have an ultra marathon on the books. And I don't know. Can't wait. It's already kind of added a bunch of energy into my training and running, and I don't know. Feels good.
For sure. Cool. Is it? So we've talked about this before, but like, it's hard for me to imagine signing up for a 50K and being really excited about it when if I'd already done a bunch of 100-milers.
Mm-hmm.
Is the excitement for you just that you're kind of getting back to racing after, becoming a dad more? And I know you race since you had kids, but, having priorities elsewhere and then COVID, is it kind of just the getting back to racing, or is there something about it that you're trying to accomplish?
So it is definitely getting back to racing. That's a big part of it, kind of getting back to a real training cycle. Mm-hmm. So let's see, the last race was right before lockdown, February 2020, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So yeah.
That was the rainy one?
That was,
I remember that. I remember that very weekend. I remember being in a hotel in North Carolina, near Charlotte for soccer. And I think I remember.
Oh yeah. Thinking that I was dreading
how miserable it was. I think I could be wrong, but I think that was it.
Okay.
But maybe.
Yeah, it probably was. Well, I don't know. I'm like mixing up everything right now, but
actually, no, I don't think that's right anymore because,
this would have been the Mount Mitchell race, not a 100-miler.
Right.
Was my last one.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I am very excited to get back into training, like a real training program and real training cycle. I'm excited about racing, and I haven't had that kind of adrenaline rush in a long time, and. It is a different type of race. It's much, much flatter than any ultra I've run in a very long time.
Okay,
so, so which is kind of freaking me out a little bit because, I'm a decent hiker and, I consider myself a pretty strong uphill hiker. And in some ways I can kind of hide behind that on these mountain races where, you get an opportunity to hike and power up. But if it's a lot flatter and all the hills are runnable, then it makes it a little more difficult to justify the hike. Yeah,
right. Interesting. Good. Well, I mean, for me, I think I never got to the point in running ultras when I thought hiking up any hill was a bad idea. So maybe you are. Maybe that would result in too slow of a 50K, but I bet you could power hike up just about any hill, and it's hard to argue that you're losing too much from that.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Cool. Well, good for you. I thought when you said big news, I was for some reason thought it must be Doug's garden news because you're kind of known for having garden adventure stories, and I don't think you really had any this year. Maybe one.
I just I've been kind of hiding them a little bit. The garden is in full swing. We have an abundance of vegetables this year. We added a third bed, which was big, and that whole bed has been dedicated primarily to squash and melons, watermelons and cantaloupe, that kind of thing, which aren't quite ready yet. But the squash has been abundant,
Yep.
Way
every,
too.
Every garden, literally every single garden, every single year has too many squash.
Yeah, it's crazy. They just keep coming. And the worst part is you see one and you're like, oh, that one's pretty good, but why don't I give it one more day? And you go back the next day and it's like as big as your leg. And you're like, oh man. And so plenty of squash. We also have a bed that's almost dedicated entirely to tomatoes and basil, so we have an abundance of that as well. We're making a bunch of sauces and salsas and a bunch of Miyoko's. We've some of Miyoko's mozzarella. Have you had that? The like block of mozz.
Right. What's it have to do with your garden?
Well, I'm making
with the tomato and basil. Okay.
Yeah, tomato
Good.
basil.
Gotcha.
Mozz on fresh sourdough bread. Delicious.
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Very good.
Things are coming in. It's good.
Good. Glad to hear that. We have no garden whatsoever in our apartment, but we're looking at buying a house, and garden is a driving factor for sure in the decision. So that would be nice. Next summer. Have you been watching the Olympics? I have. Delayed like everybody else, right? I think it's pretty much, if you're watching it prime time, it's delayed.
Is the swimming live? It says live, but is it live?
I don't know. I kind of assumed it was all delayed, but it's quite possible that it's not. That would make sense if they do certain things that are indoors, in like morning hours over there. Maybe it's live here. I don't know the time difference, but well, that's good to know. Good, makes me feel a little better about it. Yeah, we've been watching that. Both my kids are swimmers and have not since COVID, but we like that a lot. It's good times. Lots of good lessons to come out of the Olympics. Not lessons, but just sort of, it just makes everybody feel good.
Yeah, it's good, feel good stories, and also just seeing anyone compete at the top level, like sports that you never ever follow or care about, are just exciting to watch. I watched rowing the other night. For quite a long time, and I've never actually. That's not true. I've been once in a skull. What is that what you call them? I don't even know what you call them.
Stone. The stone's the thing, right? The thing you throw.
No.
Jeez. I went right to the Winter Olympic sport that nobody ever watches, except that they make fun of it, which is curling.
Curling. No, well, anyway, so you can get really excited about sports that maybe you never really paid any attention to before. And I love that.
This is not one of those, but I watched the triathlon and found that quite interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And then we watched a little ping pong, which was
nice.
not very interesting, but.
Well, what I've been excited about is rugby, which I'm not really a rugby fan. I will say that I had a roommate in college who played on the App State rugby team. I guess it's not an official team. I don't know what you call them, league team or something. So I'd go to a bunch of rugby games, but most of the time it was heavily under the influence. So I still have no idea really how the rules work. But I haven't. But the men's and women's team, some members of them have been using Complement Protein and Complement Plus. So I've been just cheering them on. And excited to watch them. The men came in 5th or 6th, maybe, but the women are still going, and they're going strong. So,
wow.
Yeah,
awesome, very cool. You know what? This is I heard an interview. I've been listening to Rich Roll again ever since we were on. I just like paying more attention to the guests and listen. I don't know. I just have this new connection to it, I guess. So I listened to the guy at 11 Madison Park, that turned his menu vegan. Thought that was super interesting. Yep. But Katie Hoff, the Olympian swimmer who was supposed to be the female Michael Phelps, basically, and turned out she never got more than a silver medal. I don't know if she won multiple or just one, but never even won gold. She said something in that interview that there was some kind of survey. I don't know if it was informal or a real sort of scientific thing, but they surveyed Olympians, people training for the Olympics, I think, and they asked them, if you could win the Olympic gold medal in your event, but you're also going to die 5 years later, would you take that deal? And she said like 80% of them said yes, they would do that. What? Yeah. So like, they couldn't be talking about all Olympians. I think it must be about, certain sports. Because I think there are a lot of Olympic sports where people kind of have maybe this is wrong or unfair, but like where they're not hugely, massively competitive sports. Not to take anything away from getting to the Olympics, because I know it's primo high level at any sport. But there've got to be some where you don't need to dedicate every waking hour to this goal.
Yeah.
And I almost wonder if that's the majority of sports, that, it's celebrating amateur sports for kind of being that. But there are these other ones, and I'm just guessing maybe this, whether it was formal or informal, was surveying people who were, the gymnasts or the swimmers or the ones who are in these big time.
Since they were 7 years old, have been in the pool every day.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it just, that really struck me. So I've talked to my kids about that, because Holden, my son, is like so into soccer, and he's just too young to call it anything like that level. And I wouldn't pretend that he's like, I think he's an amazing player, and we keep hearing that, but I don't know how it compares to, a true like swimming prodigy or someone where you just know at the beginning that they're just destined. But like, we always have this discussion, at least I do in my head, of like, is it ever worth becoming a pro athlete in a sport like that, where like it's just extremely, extremely long odds against that happening? Is it ever worth making that like your number one goal? Or is it just too remote a chance that to really take it seriously as a goal is just a bad idea? Especially because even if you make it as a pro soccer player or baseball player or NFL player, chances are you're going to play 2 years and probably not in the top league. But if you do get to the top of the top, it's going to be a short career unless you're, the 1 out of 20 who is a standout at that level. It's like, I don't know. Is that ever worth giving up all the other opportunities as a kid that you have to have school or some sort of academic topic or something that applies eventually to a work? And not that these things don't, because these sports, they do teach you lessons, and these days there's lots of ways to make livings and things. But anyway, we've been having that discussion a lot, and it just added this whole thing, like how much these people want that accomplishment. I don't know. It's really neat. It adds to how you feel when they do or don't get it.
What do I know? I'm certainly never ever going to compete at any level like that. But I imagine that, especially for the swimmers or the gymnasts or the track people who are literally grinding every day, and that's all they are thinking about and all they are working towards, and have really no other. I think it's probably fair to say that most of them are training is their career, right? At least right now.
Yeah.
Sure. And I kind of feel like you have to have that full on commitment in order to get that gold. Because if you don't, if you don't care about it that much, then like, why are you doing it?
Right. I don't know. It's bizarre.
But it kind of. So one thing I've been we may have even talked about this recently. So if we have, then cut me off. But I always like to talk about disc golf. So like one thing that's cool about that I think, or any of these sports that are maybe not like you have to be all in, but that are kind of more fringe sports that you are very passionate about and you might be competing at a top level for, is that now, because of the world we live in, you can have careers in that sport and work in that sport for the rest of your life and be really successful in that sport without actually being a top level athlete.
I think we did talk about this. You and I have definitely talked about this, and I think it was on the podcast.
Okay, but, well, then we don't need to go into that.
No, it's super cool. I've had that conversation with several people recently, because like I said, I've been thinking about that too for Holden's sake. Because like we have so much trouble getting him motivated with homeschool and like with any academic topics, because all he wants to do is soccer. I just thought it would lead down all this paths of like all this interest in these different topics, and we'd explore them together. But like any free time he gets, just wants to do soccer. So it's just like, I don't know. But so I'm actually looking at those things now and thinking like, man, maybe like a career in athletics is not the worst idea if the pro isn't the only successful outcome.
Mm-hmm. Like one of the women rugby players that I'm following right now, who is obviously one of the best in the United States, maybe one of the best in the world, like really successful rugby player. But, I think that she has, it's not like there's a professional rugby league that's a top tier sport here in America. Right.
Right.
And so she can't be making that much money off of rugby, but she has like 1 million followers on Instagram. And she has this whole like life around rugby.
Right.
That
makes much more from that.
Yeah. It's so much bigger than just kind of competing as an athlete. And I think it's awesome.
Oh, it's super cool. Yeah. All right. Well, we need to keep this episode sort of short today. And we've already gone along with the intro, but you suggested this topic, which I think is an interesting one. And we usually try to focus the things around, practical kind of help you out, especially if you're a beginner or if it has to do with a mindset thing. Because we don't try to get into too technical often, sports or even nutrition topics. We try to just keep it, I don't know, just accessible, I guess. But you had this idea to talk about what's next for the vegan movement. And at first I was thinking, well, not really practical enough, but you said last time we did something like this, it was good. And more importantly to me, it's like, maybe other people don't care about this or perceive it, but it feels to me like I personally, and then we as a brand, No Meat Athlete, are at this point where we're kind of asking what's next for us. Just, because of sort of business organizational changes, and we're like at this sort of clean slate phase. We had this immensely successful book launch with the Plant-Based Athlete, became a New York Times bestseller, which is, all I had ever hoped for from a book. So like we've accomplished that, and I had so much of my energy was geared around that. And a lot of the No Meat Athlete, attention of the audience we were putting on that for like 2 months straight, it seemed like. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so now we still got the supplement company, Compliment, of course, sponsor of this episode. We've got big goals for that. But, we're like, it feels kind of cool to have this clean slate and not really have any huge in the works projects, so that we can really almost like from the ground up design exactly the experience we think is most helpful to someone. That's not that related to the question we want to discuss today, but for some reason, like just thinking about that has made me ask that same question. Like what does the plant-based movement need now? Or like, what's the next step? And it's a good question because it seems like there's no immediate answer to me. Like we've kind of, obviously, like as far as people who, animal rights people, environmentally driven people, obviously there's we've barely made a dent in those problems. But you can sense that like we're on the trajectory to make a big dent in those problems, because of the plant-based food. To me, just the plant-based foods being in the not just the grocery stores but the fast food restaurants. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's a good thing for the movement. That's still, I know a lot of people argue that it is, and I still wonder if it is. But it's definitely an indicator of how far we've come, that it's happening. It just shows you how important this particular audience of customers, of buyers, is to those restaurants, that they're willing to put these items on their menu and advertise them prominently. And it's not just one restaurant now, it's a bunch of them. And I think
it's not even news anymore when a fast food joint picks up a Beyond Burger.
Yeah, really. Mm-hmm. So it's, I don't know. To me, I think that was sort of unimaginable even 10 years ago, which is when we kind of started doing this. We've Game Changers, like the most watched documentary of all time, I think, currently by some measures.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I heard that recently, and I think I had heard that before when it came out. I'm sure there are different ways of measuring that.
Even more than like the Michael Moore documentaries and stuff?
I think because now the reach is so much bigger with the way documentaries are watched. That's my guess.
Gotcha.
So that means the next one to come out will surpass Game Changers. But I don't know. It's like we've now, certainly we've got more to go in the athlete realm, right? Like we have top level superstars in very niche sports, and then we have, NFL players, NBA players who are pretty near the top. We have the best male tennis player in the world for a decade, Novak Djokovic, 100% vegan. Which it's hard to imagine like too much bigger level of stardom than that, but I guess we just need more like that. And so I don't know, it's like you can imagine the ground we still have to cover. Like you could imagine eventually this really just ripping through top level sports and having 20 or 30% of the league doing that or more, because they sense that that's where the money is for them to perform their best, even if for no other reason. You can imagine it getting there, but it's hard to picture like here's the next step we need to get in order to accomplish that. Like it just feels like we're kind of on that path now, and like it's snowballing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I don't know what's next. What do you think, Doug? Any main idea of what are the next year or two or 5 bringing for us?
So I have 2 things, and they're not really like it's going to be this documentary, it's going to be this big thing, but I think that 2 things are going to kind of change in the psyche of the way the world thinks about the plant-based diet. The first is that, you know, a lot of people know and associate environmentalism with eating less few animals, right? And but I still think that there are so many people who care about the environment and who consider themselves, you know, environmentalists to some degree, who have never ever considered going plant-based or even vegetarian. It's always been kind of this, in my mind, it's always been this like separate thing that, oh yeah, I should probably do that, but I'm not going to. I'm going to focus on recycling and riding my bike and you know, that kind of thing.
I think you're right about that. I can sense that even as someone who's sort of outside of that world, it's just never been my primary passion or focus. I can sense that like being green has become a mainstream thing. Like everyone wants to do that. But not yet everyone wants to be vegan or associates that, really. Like you said, that's the important thing. It's not really even linked. And I've heard people who even are like environmentalists, and they talk about who work at, you know, places dedicated to that, and they talk about it, and like it even it there, it's just not quite. I don't know. It just doesn't get through that. Like that's one of the biggest steps you can make, perhaps the biggest one.
Right.
So what's that going to take then? I mean, we already had Cowspiracy.
Yeah. Well, I think it is shifting. You know, you hear about government agencies talking about the impact of the meat industry on the environment, and you hear about, you see it in the news a little bit more. And I think that, like when I was living in DC, this was 7-8 years ago. A lot of my friends, just the network I was in, a lot of my friends worked for different environmental agencies, and very, very few of them were vegetarian or vegan, and it just wasn't really like a thing. But I think that as the conversation around meat and the impact on the environment continues to kind of become more mainstream, and people are much more comfortable with composting or recycling or riding their bike, they're already doing those things, and they're going to say like, okay, what can I do next? And and then the shift will just kind of naturally happen. That's my guess. That's what I hope, anyway.
Yeah, I can see that, and I actually, that makes me think that, and we've been talking about this as if everyone who's an environmentalist should be vegan, but
right, and that's not what I'm trying to. I mean, I'm not trying to shame anybody or anything like that.
Right. But I think just like with health, like the much more likely and much bigger opportunity is for people to have this mindset that doesn't say, well, I should be vegan if I'm into the environment. It should be that I should do my best to eat as little meat as possible or eat less meat. And that's where, assuming there's no big major backlash when everyone realizes how terrible these fake meats are for us, it's cool to see someone who's never going to become vegan, just does not want that at all, that they might think they're doing something good by having a Beyond Burger half the time when they get a burger. And then because that's just the beginning, and you can imagine that happening more and more. And even if they're never going to go below 10% of their food from animal products, that's way better than 50% of their food from animal products.
Sure.
So you can imagine that being a big thing. Like, and we sort of, the term plant-based has blown up to me in the past 2 years compared to before. And so I think that term, or maybe, I doubt there will be a new term. That's probably the one. I think that will get big. Or that's one of the big opportunities, is like this idea of like that you can be someone who eats a whole lot of plants, way more than what the typical average person does now, and you can be contributing by doing that as best you can. Yeah,
and I do think that shift is rapid. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, and I'm sure we all experience this, where we meet somebody, they find out they're vegan, they're like, oh yeah, I've intentionally tried to eat less meat, or I'm only eating fish now. Except for the occasional burger or whatever. I really think that is happening on a wide scale, and people aren't talking about, there's not a real big term for it or something like that, but the people are just reducing their meat consumption. And I may be totally off by that. I don't have any numbers to back me up. But it sure seems that way, at least with people.
Right. I think you're right. And I think there's again, this is no numbers with it whatsoever. I have the sense that when you serve someone or talk to someone about a fake meat these days, putting a meat alternative in a dish or something, there's no like, that's gross reaction anymore. I think people just sort of view that now as a viable option.
Yeah. I had one of those Impossible Whoppers. It was good.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right, so I do have another one that I think is interesting, but why don't we pause for a second to thank our sponsor?
This episode of No Meat Athlete Radio is brought to you by Complement Plus, the 8 critical, hard-to-get nutrients on a plant-based diet, all in one place. Doug, I think we can all agree that the plant-based diet is a nutrient powerhouse.
We can.
Right? But no matter how great the plant-based diet is for your long-term health, no diet is perfect. Even a well-planned diet can lack a few important nutrients for your health. That's where Complement Plus comes in. We provide the 8 hard-to-get nutrients in science-backed, bioavailable amounts, all in a simple black capsule you take every single day. It includes the nutrients you hear a lot about, like vitamin B12, D3, and DHA, EPA, omega-3s, but we've also added a handful of nutrients that are technically available through plant-based foods, but most of us aren't getting enough of them. These are like zinc, iodine, K2, magnesium, and selenium. And that's it. Everything else you're probably already getting in abundance through your plant-based diet, which is why this product exists.
Yeah, everything you need, nothing you don't. It's the perfect complement to your plant-based diet.
Hey, that's
what other taglines do we have that we can...
That's kind of all I think we've got. Everything you need. I mean, I know there've been more, but we should plan a whole bunch of them one day. Just rattle them all.
Yeah, exactly.
With Complement Plus, we've made it a complete no-brainer to give it a shot. Each batch is third-party tested for potency and purity, and those results are shared right on our website for everyone to see. There's a 30-day risk-free guarantee, so if you're not happy, you just shoot us an email, and we'll refund your purchase. If you've ever dealt with No Meat Athlete before in our customer service, you know that we make good on promises like that. And when you sign up for a flexible subscription, you get 15% off each bottle. We know that the best thing we can do for our own health, the health of the community, and Doug, like you said, the environment, and the growth of this movement is to ensure we're thriving on a plant-based diet for the long term. Learn more about Complement Plus at lovecomplement.com and use no meat at checkout to save an additional 10%.
All right.
10% or $10?
$10. Ah, you're right. I missed that typo. $10. No meat, $10 off. Lovecomplement.com. Okay, so I think that for me, and I don't know, did you have another one you wanted to jump in with, or should I just go on?
No, I'm a clean slate. I have no ideas about this.
Okay.
Just responding to what you said.
The other one, and this is maybe slightly more long term, maybe not in the next year or two, but I think it will become in the next 5 years. I envision this being a much bigger thing. As a lot of us now, me, you, and a ton of people that we both know are raising our kids vegan. And I think that really wasn't, obviously there were some people who have been vegan their whole life who are much, much older than our kids. But I think that it's much more accepted now to raise kids on a plant-based diet. And then once they become a little bit older, once they become teenagers, once they become going to high school and everything, it's going to be so much more normalized for them and their peer communities that they're going to grow up in a world where veganism is just kind of a thing and not a fringe thing, but just a part of their life. And I think that is going to be a huge shift in the communal psyche around veganism. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that is a really good point. Yeah, I mean, most of the people who eat a plant-based diet these days, I have no idea what the percentage is, but you got to imagine it's 95% were not born or raised that way.
Right.
So now, yeah, I mean, imagine by what factor the number of kids raised vegan is compared to what it would have been our generation. Mm-hmm. I mean, it must be 20 times as many. I mean, I don't know, but it's just not even a strange thing. Whereas I knew 0 vegans and vegetarian kids when I grew up, not one.
Yeah, exactly. Same.
Just didn't. Yeah. So you're right. That is a huge thing. That's a very deep kind of mindset level thing, which is not, which is more meaningful, I think, than someone who goes vegetarian or goes vegan after they see a documentary, because that doesn't typically last. But somebody who's raised that way, that's much different. That's someone who it's like a fish, being grown up in water. They don't realize they're in it. It just affects everything about their life. Right. And that's how that's going to be. So that's a really good point.
And yeah, and even if they don't stay vegan, right? Even if they didn't, they still have this, they've still grown up with that mindset around the plant-based movement and veganism, and their friends have done that too. I mean, all of her friends, all of my older daughter's friends for the most part, know that she's vegan, and some of them like don't eat dairy, and it's like not a thing, and like I don't know. I think that there's going to be a whole generation of kids that are now growing up with understanding what plant-based diet and what the vegan diet is, and when they get a little bit older, it's going to completely change the conversation.
Yeah. All right. So I do want to talk to you about if you think there's any obstacles that are next for us. We've only cited positive things, and maybe that's the path we're on, and maybe that's why it's an inevitability. But here's one I have not really discussed with anyone, and only kind of thought of just now.
Okay.
So it's not exactly tested or vetted, but like we talk about plant-based food as if it is sort of a static thing. Like we've got all these Beyond Burgers now, and like now we just need to get people to eat them, and they're good. But how come we don't talk about like the improvements to the food, the plant-based food, or the closeness with which they can replicate the real thing? And I'm not quite going to the lab-grown meat conversation here yet, but like that's certainly a one specific example of this. Like with all technological changes, that Moore's law, technology, whatever, it doubles every, 2 years, year and a half, 7 years, I don't remember, but just huge exponential growth rate. And I've also heard people talk about who are like futurist types who have said, I think it might have been Ray Kurzweil who wrote this, that when you're making guesses about the future, if they're not like completely outlandish, and this is, he's talking about the distant future, but the same goes for any scale you want. It's just to scale the amount of outlandishness. But he says if your guess about the future isn't, in many ways ridiculous and laughed at, then it's not going to be right. Because when you look at the past 200 years, like the changes that happen in the next 50, like, they are things that no one could have imagined that would possibly happen.
Yeah.
Because it's just too far out there.
Wow,
so,
I love that. That's really good.
Yeah, so to imagine then that, in the next decade, we're not going to have plant-based foods that are like indistinguishable. Like, what if we get to this point where it's you go in the grocery store and you don't actually know which one you're buying because they're so similar, and it kind of doesn't matter to anyone except for like the niche food purist who insists on certain type of beef for whatever reason because there's just something about it, like you with your analog records that you think listening to vinyl is better than listening to CDs. Like that person still might insist on the beef, and they're going to pay a lot more for it. But like I don't think it's too unlikely that not all that long from now we're going to be in that situation where it's exactly what you want. And perhaps the way to get there is this lab grown meat thing, which is, I know, is a different thing, and then there's the whole that's not exactly vegan in the vegan sense because it requires the T cells from the animals at first, but that doesn't make it any less a solution to so many of the problems that we're talking about.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. Like it kind of seems silly to talk about that without thinking that in 10 or 15 years it's just going to be in indistinguishable foods, and like we may just not even think about which one we're having.
You go to if you want a plant-based burger or a regular burger, you go to the meat counter and you just order a burger.
Right. And only if you're like insisting on the luxury item that costs more because it's guaranteed to be animal beef or something, then otherwise you just get the plant-based burger because that's cheaper and more plentiful and all these things. Which I think that much is true. Like that's not quite true yet. Obviously, the lab-grown meat costs $1,000 a pound right now, but it's not going to in a decade. Right.
So that's interesting. So is that an obstacle?
No, that was nothing as an obstacle. I guess, I mean, it'd be interesting if that was truly the case, that they were just kind of serving it and you didn't really know what you'd get, but you just always assumed it was plant food. That'd be interesting for vegans because then we'd have a new problem of like having to make sure that it is, even though it's exactly what we wanted, that everyone's eating more of it. But no, that is not a problem to me. That's one of those things where technology sort of solves all the problems, which is easy to always go to that argument around a lot of things. And so far it's been correct in many, many ways, over the past few hundred years. But what about obstacles? I mean, I think the backlash thing is one that we find out a plant-based diet isn't so healthy because it's actually not noticeably more healthy when you eat tons and tons of fake meats and things like that.
Right.
there are still some benefits. Like you can get that less saturated fat, a few less calories. You know, the IGF, insulin-like growth factor increase that happens in your bloodstream from eating animal protein doesn't happen with plant protein by and large. So I mean, there are things, but it's just not the same as eating way more fruits and vegetables. Like that's the real point: beans and nuts and seeds and all that. That's where these real health benefits are. So if people aren't doing that, but they're just swapping their meats out, you know, we're still going to have the health problems. But see, I don't know if the food just keeps getting better, then I don't see what the big drawback is ever going to be to people choosing the plant-based option if it's a little bit healthier.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's really interesting.
So what's the drawbacks? Do we have any? I mean obstacles that we're headed towards. Do we have any?
Well, so here's my fear, and I don't know if this is really an obstacle. I don't know if this fits or not, but you know, 8 years ago, when was the paleo diet? 10 years ago? When did it kind of first hit the mainstream?
First hit it longer than that, for sure. Because I remember I got the paleo diet for athletes before I started No Meat Athlete, probably 3 years before that. So 15 years ago, the paleo diet for athletes was a thing, and probably 5 years before that was the paleo diet.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm not thinking about 20 years ago. I'm definitely thinking more in the like 10 to 15 years ago when maybe it was like CrossFit was kind of exploding and the association between CrossFit and paleo was big. I mean, there was a point where I probably knew more paleo eaters than I did vegans.
Sure.
And, you know, just a lot of people, aunts, uncles, friends, random people down the street were trying the paleo diet. And my fear, and I would say that 0% of those people that I knew, well, maybe 10% of those people still kind of eat a diet like that.
Right.
My fear is that we're going through our paleo moment, and everyone's going to be doing it. Everyone's going to be talking about it. And then 10 years from now, there's going to be another diet that has everybody talking about it and trying it out.
Yeah, I would love to actually see like an analysis of this, like because you can go and Google and look at the trends and see how terms how they were searched and things like that. My sense about those, and this you probably can't get all this data 20 years back with Google necessarily, but I have a sense with those is that they probably blew up and spiked fast, because that's what fad diets do, and that's what diets that get a ton of media coverage do, is they suddenly, you know, take the nation or the world by storm. I don't think the plant-based diet is doing that, or if it is, and I completely like acknowledge that I might have a bias here, but I remember when I started No Meat Athlete, I remember in the very early years of it, I would do little interviews and text interviews, and people would say things like, "Do you think this is a fad?" And I would say, "I don't really know. Like, I'm new at it, but it seems to me that there are all these other factors that aren't just about the health. There's the environmental thing. Long term, there's economic things, and you know, the animal rights. And so it just seemed like this thing that like was sort of the result of a growing or expanding consciousness, I guess. And I think maybe that's why, like, I don't know, this diet, like, it popped up 20 years. I mean, plant-based. Like, people were doing it, whatever, 70, 80 years ago. And it's kind of been like just a steady increase since then, right? And I don't know that for a fact, but my perception of it has been a steady increase since then. And now we're like hitting the steep part of the exponential growth curve, and in the past 5 years, seeing huge changes. But I just think maybe we have a more solid foundation because it took longer than something that blows up, you know, quickly as a fad. So that's my hope to that. I don't really know, but I still think that these external factors, because this is not like the go-to weight loss diet, and it's not the go-to sports performance diet. We're trying to, you know, enlighten everybody that it can be that, or that it's at least a viable alternative to every other diet when it comes to sports. But it's not like the quick fix to all your problems diet. The health benefits that come from plant-based, the ones that have been demonstrated are long-term benefits. Right. There are short-term weight loss benefits, and you know, short-term, lots of other things that happen in the short term too. But to me, it just seems like the value proposition is so much more about long-term health, and then you've got these non-health factors, environmental and animals. So I don't know,
that's,
it just
that's
feels
a really
different
good
from
point.
those
That's a really great point. Yeah, I think you might have lessened my worry for sure. I mean, like it's without a doubt grounded in bigger picture things like the environment and animal rights and so much more than just quick gains at the gym. And I think that is the big difference. But I guess my fear is that like will it move away from the mainstream conversation and something else will replace it. But
yeah, I think that's actually going to happen. I think like we've gotten the growth we have through this slower process. And like I said, I think that foundation is more solid. But like I said, also, we're hitting that steeper part of this exponential curve, and it is becoming a cool thing in the mainstream. And most things don't stay cool in the mainstream that are that way. Mm-hmm. So I think we'll probably continue to have this slower progress. But I also think that we will, at some point, lose some of the steam that we're getting, and there will be a little bit of a, I don't know if backlash is the right word, but people going the other way because they want to be different. They want to, do the next cool thing. Yeah. But I think this will sort of continue to, even if there's like a temporary downward spike that is sort of opposite this upward spike, I think we're still going to come down a little bit higher, and then we'll just kind of keep moving up from there. That would be my optimistic guess.
I think you're right about that. Certainly hope so. Yeah.
Let's hope so. All right, good.
On that positive note, should we wrap it up?
I think so. Yeah, good. Thanks for listening, everyone. This was a little different episode for us, but fun to chat about this and to think about what's next for No Meat Athletes. So stay tuned. We're going to be sending out an email soon if you're on our email list. And if you're not, get on there. Survey kind of asking about, like, what are your thoughts about where we should go from there? Like, how can we best serve you as from our position in this community? So if you're on the email list, just look out for that. And please, if you get it, fill it out. It would help us. And it'll help you.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody.
Next week. All right.
Bye.
Bye.